wonders of science and technology. Is this what modern science is all about? A magical solution to our problems?
Science is not just gadgets or machines or increasing production of food or other goods that we use in our everyday life. Science is not just doing physics or chemistry, biology or astronomy or mathematics. Science is a philosophy of life, a value system, a method that allows us to answer questions, to find reliable answers to questions. Science is a body of knowledge that is acquired through the use of a method that we call the method of science. The method of science is useful not only in scientific research and industrial or technological innovation. The method of science can, in fact, be used to one's advantage in a whole variety of areas. It can be used to answer questions that we face in our everyday life. It can be used to deal with problems that relate to social, political, ethical, moral, economic, or other aspects of our individual or community life.
What is the method of science? There are 4 distinct steps in the method of science: question, hypothesis, experiment, and answer. The scientific method consists of asking questions, building a hypothesis to answer these questions, setting up experiments to test the hypothesis, and hopefully arriving at a satisfactory answer. The first step in the method of science is to question. Questions arise out of careful observation or careful analysis of existing knowledge. Nature presents a panorama of beautiful and interesting scenes to observe. This rich play of light and color in nature has fascinated many scientists. One of these was Sir C.V. Raman. He questioned, why is the sky blue? What gives flowers and butterflies their color? Why do gemstones glitter? What's meant by the color of an object? Raman's observations and his search for answers to such questions led him to the discovery of the Raman effect. For this, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. Questioning is an important attribute of the method of science. In science, there are no high priests who cannot be questioned. Do you observe and question? more carefully you observe, the better framed your questions will be. And if you've properly framed your questions, you're on your way to finding a possible answer, the hypothesis. About 500 years ago, Copernicus questioned the universal belief that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and that the Sun and the planets revolved around it. He put forward the hypothesis that the Earth and other planets revolved around the Sun. This hypothesis stood the test of Galileo's observations when he turned his telescope to the skies. So, a hypothesis should be testable. A common observation is that any object falls to the ground if left unsupported. We can't test the hypothesis that the objects fall to the ground because God wills them to do so. A testable hypothesis would be that an object falls to the ground because a force of attraction exists between the object and the earth. This hypothesis led to the law of universal gravitation, formulated by Sir Isaac Newton. Once a testable hypothesis has been framed, the next step is to find the actual answer to the question. This is done through experiment. Experiments should be planned carefully and carried out under strictly controlled conditions. Experiment helps to find an answer to a question. In 1928, Alexander Fleming observed that a mold growing in a dish destroyed the bacteria around it. The question was, what substance in the mold destroyed the bacteria? He carried out a carefully designed experiment to find the answer. The experiment resulted in the discovery of penicillin, a life-saving drug much in use today. Experiment also helps to prove or disprove a hypothesis. For example, let's test the hypothesis that 24 pills of Natron of potency 6x taken every day for a few days can cure many illnesses. Experiments show that Natron contains only common salt in a minute quantity in a sugar base. Now, we consume between 5 to 20 grams of common salt every day. The tiny amount of salt in Natron won't have any additional effect on our body. So, the hypothesis that Natron can cure many ailments is disproved. What hypothesis would you frame for these observations? And how would you test your hypothesis? Experiments enable us to arrive at a decisive answer. An answer may be in the form of a fact, a general law, or a theory. Louis Pasteur did experiments to show that living organisms can be generated only from similar living organisms and not spontaneously from dead matter as was earlier believed. Only life begets life.
You have seen a few examples
illustrating the various steps that are used in the method of science. In going from one step to the other, we use logical reasoning and the entire repertoire of knowledge that is at our command. We should remember that on many occasions we use the method of science without knowing that we have done so. In fact, all through history, wherever and whenever decisions that have stood the test of time have been taken, one would realize that the method of science was used.
How is the method of science used? The method of science has many applications. For example, we observe that objects cast shadows when placed in the path of light. We question, what is the path of light? The hypothesis could be, light travels in a straight line. And the experiment, if light travels in a straight line, the light source should be visible through hole C when A, B and C are in a straight line. When A, B and C are not in a straight line, the light source should not be visible through hole C. You can test this yourself by a simple experiment. As a result of the experiment, we can formulate the law that light travels in a straight line. But sometimes light appears to travel along curved lines, as in these glass fibers. Light from a source follows the curvature of the fiber. Does the law fail in such cases? No. In fact, in such cases, light undergoes a series of internal reflections, which enables it to follow a curved path. The law that light travels in a straight line does not hold when light travels from one medium to another. It changes its path. So a law may be valid under certain conditions only. This is how scientists use the method of science to investigate various phenomena.
As we have said earlier, the use of the method of science is restricted not only to science. This method can be used in many areas in our everyday life, in finding solutions to problems that come before us all the time, in resolving personal dilemmas of every kind.
The method of science is used in areas other than science. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels applied the method of science to human history and to social, political, and economic problems. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin used the method of science to evolve the concept of planning for development and for the achievement of social objectives. In India, Jawaharlal Nehru tried to repeat this experiment in a different way. But we have yet to realize his dream of a modern, scientific and developed Indian society. Whatever the area of application, scientific method essentially means a refusal to accept anything without test or trial. It also demands reliance on observed fact and evidence.
There are no secrets in science. You, too, can do or know all that a scientist does or knows. And a scientist is one who understands the method of science, who understands the attributes of knowledge that one acquires through the use of the method of science, who recognizes that the method of science is the only reliable way to find answers to questions of every type, and who uses the method of science in his everyday life to find answers to the questions that come his way. On the other hand, if you have a degree in science but do not do so, do not accept the method of science as the only way to finding an answer to a question, do not understand the method that science uses to acquire knowledge, do not recognize the various attributes of knowledge gained through the application of this method, and do not use this method to find answers to your questions, you are not a scientist.
Can the method of science be applied to problems one faces in everyday life? Let's consider an example. What shall I do to help my brother, who's suffering from typhoid, get well as quickly as possible? Should I pray for him? Should I let nature take its course and hope for the best? Should I give him a homemade medicine recommended by a friend? Should I consult a doctor? After careful thought and analysis of alternatives, I conclude that the only course of action likely to cure my brother is to consult a competent doctor. You can answer many more questions using the method of science. For example, what should I sow in my field at this particular time? Should I save money to build a house, or should I use it on my children's education? How shall I find out what's wrong with my bicycle? Scientific method can also be used to examine so-called supernatural events or miracles. A famous magician, Houdini, would be tied in a sack and placed in a locked trunk, which was then dropped in a river. He could escape and swim ashore safely. Did Houdini have supernatural powers? The method of science was used to find an explanation. Just before being tied up, Houdini would swallow a knife and a key to the trunk. Inside the trunk, he would vomit out the knife and the key, open the sack and the lock from the inside of the trunk. He would then come out and swim ashore. Did you notice that the method of science is equally valid under conditions where an experiment is not possible, provided you rely on observations, facts, logic, and reasoning?
We have, in this program, tried to say something about the method that science uses to find reliable and verifiable answers to questions. We, however, would not like you to accept what we have said just because we have said it without questioning. We, however, would expect that if you question what we have said, you would do so within a framework of reason and objectivity. We hope that you would conclude that it is in your interest to accept the method of science as something that works and that you can use in your everyday life to find answers to your questions.